There are places in this world that are supposed to make you feel safe. Your home, a police station, a hospital. And I think that's exactly what makes what I'm about to tell you so deeply disturbing. Because when the one place that exists specifically to protect you becomes the most dangerous place you've ever been in your life, something inside you just never fully recovers from that. My name is Ryan. I'm 29 years old. I live in Columbus, Ohio. And I need to talk about what happened to me during the 3 nights I spent as a patient at Mercy General. Because I've been carrying this around for 2 years now, and honestly, I don't think I can hold on to it anymore. What started as a routine surgery turned into something I still can't fully explain. Something that, if I hadn't trusted my gut on the 3rd night, I genuinely believe I would not be here right now talking to you. I want you to remember one thing as you listen to this. I was in a hospital. I had a fresh surgical incision, I could barely walk, and I was completely alone. Let's go back to the beginning. It was a Tuesday in March of 2023 when I went in for a scheduled appendectomy. Nothing dramatic. My appendix had been giving me low-grade grief for weeks, and my doctor finally said, "Let's just take it out before it becomes an emergency." I wasn't scared. I'd had minor surgery before. I figured I'd be in and out in 2 days, maybe 3. The procedure itself went totally fine. I remember that specifically because I thought about the number, pi, and made a dumb joke to the nurse about it when they first checked me in. She didn't laugh. Whatever. The room had a large window to my left that looked out over the parking garage, one of those automatic blood pressure cuffs on my arm, an IV in my right hand, a call button clipped to the bed railing, and a door directly across from me that stayed about a quarter of the way open all night, because the night nurses like to be able to hear patients without them having to press the call button. That first night passed without incident. I slept badly. You always sleep badly in hospitals, but nothing happened. The nurses came and checked on me every couple of hours. I watched TV until like 2 in the morning, fell asleep, woke up when they brought breakfast. Normal. Totally normal. It was the 2nd night that it started. Brianna came back during the day on Wednesday, and we watched movies on her laptop, and it was actually kind of nice. Like a weird little staycation, except I had a tube coming out of my arm and my stomach was on fire every time I laughed. She left again around 8:30, and almost immediately I noticed him. There was a man standing in the hallway. Now, obviously, that's not weird. Hospitals have people in hallways. Visitors, patients in gowns, walking labs, nurses, orderlies, everyone. A man standing in a hallway is not a red flag by itself. But this guy wasn't moving. He was just standing there directly across from my room, about 15 feet down the corridor to the left, far enough that I couldn't see his face clearly through that quarter-open door. He had on dark street clothes, jeans, a dark jacket, not a patient, no gown, no visitor badge that I could see from where I was. And he was looking at my room. I watched him for probably 2 minutes, waiting for him to move, go somewhere, anything. He didn't. He just stood there with his hands at his sides like he was waiting for a bus. I pressed the call button and a nurse came in. Young woman, maybe mid-20s, I think her name was Deja. And I told her there was a guy standing in the hall who looked out of place. She poked her head out and looked and came back and saying she didn't see anyone. He was gone by the time she looked. I told myself I was just post-surgery paranoid. The anesthesia, the pain meds. My body had been through something and my brain was probably running a little hot. I tried to watch TV and forget about it. Around midnight, I woke up from a half sleep and he was back. Same spot, same posture, same dark jacket. Except this time the hallway was dimmer. They dropped the corridor lighting at night to let patients sleep. And what little light there was caught his face just enough for me to realize he wasn't looking at my room. He was looking directly at me. I'm not talking about a casual glance in my direction. This man was staring at me with the kind of fixed, deliberate attention that makes your whole body go cold. The kind of look that communicates something without a single word. I pressed the call button again. Different nurse this time, older, and she was visibly a little annoyed at being called in for a 2nd time. She looked in the hallway. He was gone again. She asked if I needed anything for sleep and I said no and she left. I did not sleep after that. I spent the rest of the night watching that slice of hallway through the gap in the door. Exhausted, heart thumping in my chest, feeling absolutely insane. He didn't come back, and by morning I had almost convinced myself I'd been hallucinating. Almost. I was supposed to be discharged Thursday morning. That was the plan, but my surgical site showed some minor inflammation during morning rounds, and my doctor wanted to keep me one more night for observation. Just precautionary, nothing alarming. I remember feeling weirdly reluctant about that in a way I couldn't immediately explain. Like something in my gut was pushing back against the idea of staying another night in that room. I almost pushed back on the doctor, almost asked if I could sign an AMA waiver and just go home. I didn't, because it was medically the right call and I'm not an idiot. Brianna was at work and couldn't come that night. I told her about the man in the hallway from the night before. She said it was probably just someone waiting for news on a family member, maybe standing there to be near someone's room without wanting to go in. That's a real thing, she reminded me. People do that in hospitals. She was right. That's a totally reasonable explanation. So why couldn't I shake it? I asked the day nurse, a big friendly guy named Marcus, if there was any way they could keep my door fully closed at night instead of cracked open. He said they actually prefer it cracked for safety monitoring purposes, but that if I was really uncomfortable he could make a note. I said please do that. Around 5 in the afternoon, a man came into my room. He didn't knock. He just walked in, and my first thought was he was a doctor. He had that kind of purposeful belongs here energy. He was probably late 40s, medium build, dark hair going gray at the temples. He was wearing dark slacks and a collared shirt, and he was holding a clipboard. He said he was from patient services, said they were doing a routine check-in on long-stay patients to make sure everything was comfortable. I told him I was fine. He asked a couple of questions. Was I happy with my care? Was the food okay? That kind of thing. Normal stuff. But the whole time he was asking me questions, his eyes were moving around my room, slowly, methodically, like he was doing an inventory. And then he looked at the window. He walked over to it and without asking, without saying anything, and just stood there looking out at the parking garage for a few seconds. I said something like, "Can I help you with something?" Kind of trying to joke, but not really joking. He turned around and smiled at me, and I need to try to describe this smile to you because it's the detail that I come back to most. It wasn't warm. It wasn't professional. It was the smile of someone who has made a decision. Like the expression was performing friendliness, while something else entirely was happening behind his eyes. He said, and I remember this verbatim because I've replayed it 1,000 times, "You've got a great view from up here. You can see every car coming and going." And then he walked out. I stared at the door for probably 10 seconds. And then I grabbed my phone and called Brianna. I told her I needed her to call the hospital and asked to speak to whoever ran their patient services department. She thought I was overreacting, but she heard something in my voice and she did it. She called me back 7 minutes later. There was no patient services check-in scheduled. The hospital's patient services department didn't conduct in-room visits in the evening. They do their check-ins during the day shift. The man who came to my room had no reason to be there. At this point, I'm trying to stay calm, but my heart is going absolutely crazy. I still have an IV in. My stomach hurts every time I move wrong. I can't exactly sprint out of there. I called the nurses' station directly and told them what happened. Described the man. They said they would have security do a walkthrough, and someone would come check on me. About 20 minutes later, a security guard came in. Young guy, early 20s, kind of bored looking. And he took down my description and said they'd keep an eye out. He didn't seem that concerned, and I understood why. Because on paper, what had happened? Some guy asked me about my food and looked out my window, that's it. That's the whole thing, but I knew. I cannot explain to you how or why I knew, I just did. The way you sometimes know something is wrong before you can put language to it. I called Brianna back and told her to come. She said she'd be there in 45 minutes. I told her to come faster. I sat in that bed watching the door. 30 minutes passed, and then very slowly the door to my room began to open. The door that I had specifically requested be kept closed. It opened about halfway and stopped. And through the gap came a hand, a man's hand gripping the edge of the door, and then an arm. And then he was there, not fully in the room, just positioned in the doorway, his body in the hall and his arm and shoulder inside the frame. It was the same man, the one with the clipboard. He wasn't smiling anymore. He looked at me and I looked at him, and for about 2 seconds neither of us moved. And I have never in my life experienced 2 seconds that lasted that long. I pressed the call button, And I didn't press it once, I just held it down and kept holding it. I also screamed. I screamed as loud as I could, and not for help, not any particular word, just a sound. The loudest sound I could make. And I'm not embarrassed about it because it worked. There were footsteps immediately, multiple sets of them running, and when he heard them coming from down the hall, that man turned and walked away fast. And by the time 2 nurses came through my door 30 seconds later, he was gone. I told them everything. They called hospital security. Brianna showed up while the security staff was still there and lost her mind on all of them. The on-call hospital administrator was pulled in. They reviewed the security camera footage from my corridor. The man appeared on camera 4 separate times across Wednesday night and Thursday. He had entered the hospital through the emergency department waiting room on Wednesday, which is open to the public and basically impossible to screen. He had a visitor sticker on, which you can get at the front desk just by signing in. But the name on the sign-in sheet was fake, and the person he claimed to be visiting didn't exist. They identified him from the footage and shared it with Columbus PD. I found out about 2 weeks later, after I was back home and recovered, that the man had been arrested. He had a prior history of targeting patients in hospitals and care facilities, specifically patients who were alone, specifically patients near windows with a view of the parking area, because he could watch from outside to determine whether someone had visitors or not. I want to let that sink in. He was watching from the parking garage. He knew when my girlfriend left. He knew when I was alone. He came on the second night to confirm the layout and get eyes on me. And he came back on the third night with a plan. What that plan was, I can only guess. And I've thought about it more than I'd like to admit.